Welcome to Chef's Academy. I am Chef Romain and joining us today all the way from Montreal is Thomas Delannoy, Rougier's very own marketing and sales director of the Americas. Though Rougié has been in Canada since 1998, it is the world #1 producer of foie gras and molar duck specialties. The company was founded in 1875 but gained international acclaim in the 50s. Here at home, you can find Rougié farms in a small town of Marieville on the east side of Montreal in the province of Quebec. The brand is a pillar in the international food service industry with commitments in many of the world's top competition, including, of course, the World's Pâté Croûte Championship, which the American final have been stolen from New York City to take place in Montreal. Of course, the Bocuse d'Or and the Jean Rougié Young Chef competition. Today, we lift the veil on all things foie to enable you as a professional chef to better select, cook, and use these luxurious ingredients in the best way possible. And that is why we have invited and have the honor to spend some time with Thomas. Thank you so much for being here with us today. So tell us about the origins of foie and how it became the prime ingredients it is today.
Well, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. It's actually a very interesting story. The story began about 5,000 years ago with the Egyptians, where they realized that the geese had this natural behavior of eating before the winter or before the migration. And they were converting the food into fat in their liver, and that became foie gras. That's a natural behavior that they do to store the energy in the liver and then use that as power for the long flights when they go north, and same when they go south. The female also do that before giving birth. So it's really like us humans, we have the fat in our belly or other parts of the body, and for them, these waterfalls, they use the fat in the liver. The knowledge was then transmitted thanks to the Jewish diaspora when they flew from Egypt and they traveled through Europe. They brought all this knowledge with them, and they had less and less access to olive oil because of the weather. Naturally, it was colder. So they were actually feeding, they were giving more food to the geese so that they start getting fat and then render this fat and use that as oil or fat to store some products, some meat into the jars. So it's a very fun story it's not from the French, it's from the Egyptians from a very, very long time that people don't know. And that was a way to store the food and to use fat in the Jewish diaspora.
I can tell that maybe I'm a bit of a duck too, because I've been keeping my fat going.
And so am I.
Let's talk about farming and processes. Foie gras is a liver from a duck of a goose that is fattened through force feeding called gavage. How is the process different at Rougié than it is with other brands?
So we've actually learned from the animal itself, where we decided to adapt to the personality of each of these animals, which is different from other companies that try to do, let's call it industrial farming, where they do it at a very large scale and they force each animal to eat what they decided. And we turn the process around where, because if it's a natural behavior, like I just said, we learn from each animal persona. We will adapt the meal for each and every bird. We tag them with color in case we forget. And we also do something very special, is replicate the natural behavior of winter is coming. So they will start gorging themselves. And to do that, when they had food and water available all their life. Imagine the room is so big, it's clean, it's almost like a spa. We start hiding the food and we'll make it available only once or twice a day. And imagine, what would they do? They would do the same as us. We eat more at lunch and dinner because there's 12 hours in between each meals. So they do the same, they start gorging themselves, they start storing the food, they start developing the liver and having a natural foie gras. They also start all this system, the esophagus and everything is then prepared to absorb a larger quantity of food. And when it comes to gavage, then it's very easy for them. It's like having a Christmas dinner.
Yeah, because it's loosened up already, so it's going to go through a lot easier.
Exactly. So we learn from each animal, we adapt to them, we don't ask them to adapt to what we want, and we learn them to gavage themselves. And then at the end of the process, we still haven't found this ultimate solution where we no longer need to use the tube. We still do, but we're still working on that to get rid of the tube. But the reason we do it is simply to adjust the quantity of the meal. Again, some will have a little bit more, some will have less. At the end, we want them to have to get fat, but healthy at the same time.
That's very important too, so we take care of the animal.
Correct.
So the feeding, the pre-gavage, etc., how does that impact the product at the end?
So it's no surprise, an animal that's healthy and was treated in the right conditions will give you the best product possible. And that's why we're very proud at Rougié to see that the end result is of the top quality. But on top of what I explained, there are other secrets, like we look for the best flour of corn, and we source it in Quebec. We try a different mix to find really the best one that would give at the end a very nutty taste. When you have other farmers, they will try to cut it with soy because it's less expensive, but at the end it would give a bitter taste to the foie gras. So we just want the best food possible for the animal. We want it to be healthy and in the best conditions, the best farming conditions. And we also the pioneer in using the IQF. IQF, it's not new. You see that for fish, you see that for berries, but no one ever applied it for foie gras before. So we use the same because the quality is so great. Using the liquid nitrogen right after harvest, you can really seal all the fat in the cells and keep the freshness, the taste, the nutty taste I was talking about, like all the best advantages of this product.
For sure. And I think for people watching, I mean, to compare it to something we know, for example, beef or pork, it's the same idea, right? We have the fat, the marbling, or in this case, the fat is in the duck, right? So we understand the better the fat, the better the animal, the better it's raised, the higher the quality of the final product. So explain to us why there are variation in prices between different suppliers of foie gras in the market and why Rougié is one of the most expensive.
So we know we're the most expensive on the market, but obviously there's a reason for it. Part of it is what I just explained, is all the care, the attention that we're giving to each bird. That requires a lot of labor, a lot of time. The space in the farm, it's so big. It's not like let's say an industrial chicken farm where you have million per square foot. Like we really want them to have as much space as possible. The time, there's also a curve, natural curve for the animal to be fully adult. So all this time, people, the best corn also has a cost to it. So the fact that we want to remain as a small scale, like we're doing a very small production in Quebec, and to do that and not fall into the industrial side of it, it has a cost. But at the end, you can see that in your plate. You're a chef, you buy this product, you try in a cooking pan with a different product. Right away, you would see the difference, you would taste the difference, and if you use a scale, you will also see that the end product weighs more in the plate than with another one.
And we actually are going to show you in a little bit this actual cooking process from two different products, so you can actually see the difference on the scale, therefore on the guess, but also in your wallet. Alright, so we're now in the kitchen and Thomas is going to first split the two lobe. Of course, there's always two sides of it. Then it's going to start to make some slices. This is a fresh, never frozen foie gras, and we're going to cook it and see the difference with one that has been IQF, so we can see the difference on the scale. First, we're going to place the fresh foie gras, which is about 30 grams, and then we're going to put the IQF one that's also 30. We'll then place them in a hot pan, and we're going to see right away the difference in cooking. When we flip it, we're going to see that the first slice, which has been IQF, already has a better coloration on them. Then back on the scale, 17 grams from 30, and the one that was fresh, 13. So that's a difference of 4 grams. Also in terms of texture, you can see one is a lot more plump than the other. So now let's talk about all the controversy around foie gras, because there are many. So How do you answer to that?
So let's be frank. We know some people disagree with the fact that we're helping the animal to get fat, but to me, the answer is the same as someone who chooses to be a vegetarian, a vegan, or any choice that you can make in what you eat. We try to do it the best we can. That's why we try to every year improve the farming process. We don't want to rely on what was done in the 50s. So we keep trying new techniques, new ways, reducing the light, the temperature, putting some music, more fans. Like, we really want it to be the best we can. And it's the same for other farmers in the chicken, in the pork, or any other industry. Even in the vegetable industry, you see a lot of use of pesticides or other things. So same as any farmer, we try to make it better. We don't force anyone to use it. We don't force anyone to eat it. We just try to explain, and that's the goal today. And thanks for having me, having this opportunity to share our story as a farmer of what we do and the fact that we're trying to do it best. Then, of course, there's always going to be better ways. And I think what really shocks people is this image of having the tube down the throat. But you know that in the wildlife, the ducks or geese, they would eat naturally in the lake, they would eat a fish that's like so big. Their anatomy is different than ours. And that's
to expand, yeah.
It can expand, and that's why sometimes people try to put themselves into the animal's shoes, but we have a different anatomy, a different body. So the animal can naturally have this large amount of food, digest it, transfer it into the liver to make it a foie gras, and then use this energy for the migration. So we've actually worked with some researchers that show that the animal can do this, that the foie will expand and then come back to a normal size or a smaller size, and then again and again and again, and they do that all their life. We only do it once, and we help them through the process.
So let's talk about the grades of foie gras. There are two grades which you've brought to show us today, which are recommended for different applications.
So I'll show you, Romain, and I'll show to our viewers. We grade each foie gras by hand, and it's always a minimum of three different people that will do it, so we make sure that we haven't missed anything. This one is grade A. You can, I think, quickly see the difference.
Very much so.
With the B grade. So we'll show at the camera, but basically what we do is we first weight it. We make sure that it's mathematically, we know that the perfect size would be around 600 grams. That's where you would have the less rendering. Then you want to have this beautiful gold color. There's no marks, there's no, sometimes the birds can fight with each other, and that would make a trace of blood that would damage a little bit. That happens. So if there's really any defect, it would become a B grade. And then the third factor and the last would be the texture of it. Again, from experience, if you touch it, it should leave a trace. It should be not too soft, not too tough. It is just something that you get from experience, that with this perfect texture, you would have the best result in terms of rendering, in terms of taste. So you see when I did it with my thumb, then you have a perfect trace. If it's too soft, then you know that push it down, more rendering.
Well, and again, going back to talking about pricing and talking about everything, this is something that no machine can do. It takes somebody with experiment, it takes somebody that has practiced a lot, and it's something that you have to do by hand and literally foie by foie. So that adds up, of course, to the final price.
Once we've graded them, we know grade A, grade B. It was more about the look and what we know in terms of rendering and potential. If I were a chef, if I want to do searing, for example, you're going to have like some heat in the foie. For that, 100% you have to use the grade A. That's the one you will have the best result. But if you're actually doing a slowly cooked terrine for like 60 minutes, you don't necessarily need to use the grade A. You can, open it, clean, remove the small defects, the small parts, you season, you slowly cook it. you can use the B grade. You don't need to necessarily buy the grade A. If you're doing, I don't know, a farce, a sauce, or a mousse, and you just want to blend the whole foie, then 100%. You don't need to pay the price of the grade A. You can simply use the B. So that's why we're always very transparent on that's the A, that's the B, and we don't want to force anyone to pay the full price. We just want you to use the right product for your application.
Yeah, so to make it simple, if you're going to see the product as a whole, grade A, if you're going to be transformed and mixed, grade B.
Correct.
Easy enough. And of course, there's also different types of the actual final transformed product. Not everything contains 100% of the foie, going back to grade A, grade B. So can you please let us know more about it? And we have the selections in front of us as well.
Sure, so foie gras is a raw ingredient. You can, like I said earlier, use the grade A, slice and sear it. You have a piece of pure foie gras, 100% that is served hot, like a steak. But you can also do a preparation where you cook it and then serve it cold. And of course, when you do that, you can, when you blend it, you can serve an end result that's 100%, 90%, 50%. And there's no legislation here in Canada, but we try to replicate the same names that are used in Europe because it's been there for hundreds of years. So when we call it entier, entier is really, I took the foie, opened it, removed the veins, cleaned it up, salt, pepper, rolled it, and cooked it. That's really entier in French because it's 100%.
Nothing added, yeah.
But I could also put it in a blender. I could add a little bit of water, salt, pepper, maybe a little bit of cream. And then when you go down from this 100% entier, you could go to 90%, that becomes a block, 70%, that becomes parfait, or 50% becomes a mousse.
One way to, that's more like as a French person eating foie gras, I always say like the easier to spread, the lesser amount of foie you have inside.
Exactly, you're right.
So now I'm putting my chef jacket on. So we have one issue with foie gras. It's when we cook in it, we are losing so much density. So what does foie gras meant?
Imagine that basically foie gras, it's a big block of butter. It's pure fat. So same as putting a chunk of butter in the pan, it will melt. So that's why naturally the property of the product itself will melt, but you know from experience that the fat is contained into the cells. So the longer you wait, the more cells will then, let's say, degenerate, and when it touches the heat, the fat will quickly get out of this cell. So at Rougié, that's why we always want the foie to be of the freshest, and we ship fresh foie gras everywhere across the country. But we also IQF with the nitrogen at the slaughterhouse within the first hour, so we seal the fat into the cells. That would be the first reason. The second reason will be the weight of the foie. Some ducks will eat a little bit more than others. There's no more room into the cell to store the fat. The fat will be outside this cell, and then that's the first thing that comes out into the pan. So weight and time are really the two factors that you want to look at to find the best foie gras. And
I will add as well that the foie fat isn't gone. You can actually repurpose it and use it for different preparations. So keep that aside, filter it, and use it in your veggies or anything you're really cooking with.
It's liquid gold.
It's what we call it, the liquid gold. So like all the good things, they have to be eaten in moderation. Foie isn't typically associated with something healthy. Is that a myth, or does foie have some health properties?
Actually, the duck fat is excellent. It's good for your health. It has an excellent source of unsaturated fatty acids, protects for the cardiovascular system. From the studies that we've done, it shows that it contains twice as less saturated fat than butter and 3 times more unsaturated fatty acid than butter. So it's actually a good source of omega-3. It's like you said, you always have to not eat too much fat in your diet, but it's a good source of fat, actually better than butter. Not as good as olive oil though.
Everyone knows I'm not a fan of wasting, and no one should really. So we do feed the duck for its foie, but what happens to the rest of the Rougié ducks?
So like the foie, the other parts are also very delicious. We have the duck breast, the duck legs, even on the bones we can get all the meat from it. So at Rougié we use from nose to tail, if we can say, from the duck. There's a big demand for duck breast, like it's really, really delicious. The legs are mostly confit, that's the way people like it. And then in the chef industry, we see more and more chefs doing their own stock and sauce, and using the or duck bones and the meat and the fat that is still on the bones is something that would really bring something different to your sauce.
Absolutely. I'm very lucky that I've had the confit many times, and let me tell you, it is incredible. So we do keep the foie intact when slicing for seared foie. But for terrine and torchon, we have to devein it. So let's show our audience how to devein a lobe of foie gras so they know how to do it properly.
And we will use the B-grade Rougié foie gras, as Thomas mentioned earlier, because the idea is to make a terrine. Please note that before denerving, you have to make sure the lobes are at room temperature. I'm going to split each lobe, the large one and the small one, and using a spoon or a palette knife, we are going to look for the two nerves network. There is two, one on top, one below. The idea is to find the widest part so we can actually use it as the beginning and try to track every single one that's gonna run all through the liver. You want to take your time with it because you do not want to break the network, as it will be really hard to find the really small nerves, and also you don't want to work too much the foie so it doesn't fall apart in many pieces. Once you find it, as you see, we can just pull it and then take it away. Then the second one, much larger, is just underneath. You'll repeat the same actions until you have removed every single nerves. Of course, there might be some little bit left, but that's okay as long as the main ones are gone. We'll then put the foie gras together, lift it up, and repeat the exact same process with the second one, the smaller lobe. Same idea, you're gonna find the widest part of the nerve, the center, and then go towards the end so we can find every single nerves. After we've done that, we're gonna also rebuild the foie. It will be then ready for the next process. At this point, I am going to do a marinade. I usually do port, brandy or Armagnac, and season it with salt and pepper. You could use a curing salt. Really, it's really up to you based on your recipe. Ultimately, you could also keep it for a mousse or another application, or you can even leave it for later, but just make sure that you wrap it lightly. Ideally, you can even vac pack it, it's even better. Avoid too much light, as we want to make sure we have zero oxidation in the foie.
Well, thank you so much, Thomas. This was a very insightful class. We hope that we answered all of your questions, everything foie gras, really. And thank you to the Chefs Canada community for tuning in today. If you want to be featured on the Chefs Canada page, chat with me and run a Chefs Academy masterclass on a topic you are specialized in, DM us or visit our website and let us know. Monsieur Thomas, it was a pleasure having you today. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Romain.
Thank you.